There was a comment that came up asking if we could talk more about cutouts. Now, this came up in a video that I made about the sketch tool in Tinkercad. And recently I made a video exploring the basic tools of Tinkercad by designing vases. And there was one vase in particular that I thought would be a great way to illustrate the use of cutouts. This one right here. It has a nice shape to it, wide at the top, but tapers down and narrows towards the bottom. So how would you make this in Tinkercad? You could use sketches to create cutouts and eventually create a shape that looks like this. How would you do this? That's what this video is all about. All right, I know it doesn't look like much, but this is eventually going to be our vase. I've basically put together two cubes here, the one on the bottom and one on the top. And using the settings here on the side, I've added some curved edges to it by playing around with the radius and the number of steps, ensuring that I have the curved edges along the top and along the bottom. Now, in terms of the ones along the sides here, those will be cut off as we apply our cutout to it. Now, in terms of the dimensions, the base is the right size. It is 6.5 centimeters along the X and the Y axis, and along the top, it is 12 centimeters by 12 centimeters. Height-wise, it is about 19 centimeters tall. So this solid is basically the right dimensions, but what we need to do is we need to cut away some of this solid in order to be left with our final vase shape. All right, now it's time to make our cutout, and I'm going to use the sketch tool to make our cutout for this vase. So I'm going to go over here on the side, select it, and just drag it out onto the surface of our object. Now you can see here that I have the base shape silhouetted here on my grid line. That's perfect because I can use that as a great reference when I start creating my sketch to make our cutout. But you'll notice that these grid lines here, and you can see I've got the y-axis and the x-axis here, those are great guidelines, but they are not centered to my red starting object there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align it so that they are perfectly centered to each other. So I'm going to click Finish Sketch. Well, that's come out of there. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to select both of those objects, the sketch object as well as my red base object. And I'm going to do the Align tool, or L. And I want to make sure it's centered on the surface of our red object there. So I'm going to select my red object so it doesn't move. And I'm just going to center it like that along the Z and along the X axis. I'm not going to put it centered on the Y axis because it's going to sink it in there. I just want it on the surface of our object there. Now I'm going to get out of the alignment tool and I am going to select the sketch again. Now you're going to see that those darker X and Y axes grid lines are now centered perfectly on our red starting object. And I can use that now to my advantage when I start designing and creating my cutout for this vase. I'm going to start using the sketch tool here. If you've never used this before and you start to feel yourself getting lost in this, I will include a link at the end of the video to a video that I made about the basics of the sketch tool in Tinkercad, so check it out. All right, you're going to notice here that I've got my snap grid set to 1 millimeter, which means that as I move my cursor around in here and try to place points, it will snap to every millimeter. And if I zoom in, you can see those millimeters are those faint blue boxes there. And how Sketch works is basically you are going to draw out shapes by dropping down points. And as you drop down points, you're going to notice that they are connected together with lines. And that's how you're essentially going to create your shape. The trick here is that you don't want to throw down too many points because it does make it really difficult to try to get basic shapes. It's not connect the dots here. It's more like placing down points where you can shape turns or curves in your shape. And this is what I'm talking about. I'm going to start in the center here and work on just the 1/2 of my cutout. So let's start here. I'm going to throw down and click there to throw down my first point. Now I'm going to throw down a point outside here. And there's a reason why I'm doing that. I'll explain that in a sec. Let's throw down another point here. And then the shape of our vase sort of pinches in here. And let's just put it around to something like this. I'm zooming in and zooming out here in order to reset my screen because as I move down, I need to get at the rest of this diagram here. So one way you can do that is by clicking the minus button to sort of zoom out. And there you go. And then I can zoom back in using my trackpad, like so. And I'm just going to continue doing that. I got to zoom out again, actually, to tell you the truth. Let's do that, like to there. I want to place it right there. Okay. And I'm then going to go to the midpoint here and go right at the midpoint. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because this shape that I've drawn out here on the left-hand side is essentially going to be the same as the right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just simply going to complete this shape. And later on, what I'll do is I'll just simply copy and flip this shape over to the other side. So I don't have to worry about trying to recreate this same shape on the other half of my sketch here. So what we are sketching out here is the actual shape of the vase. But we're then going to take that shape and convert it into a cutout and apply it to the red object that we see the silhouette of here in the background. Let's just finish the sketch here to show you where we are in all of this. So finish sketch, and this is what I'm talking about. There is our object. Let me just recenter this. There it is. There is our object there that we made in Sketch. And like I said before, we are going to, when it's done, copy it or duplicate it and then complete the other half of this by simply pasting it to the other side. But once we've done that, we need to then convert this into a cutout and apply it to this red object here, which is basically going to become our vase eventually. But first, we have to do more with this sketch. So let's go back into it. We're going to double click on this sketch and we're going to shape it some more. With our shape completed, we can select it and I can double click on it. Now, when I double click on it, it reveals my points again, and there they are there. And once I have these points revealed, you see that you have some options here along the left-hand side. This plus and minus allows you to add or subtract points by simply clicking on it. I can add more points, or by clicking on a point, I can remove them as well. So let's remove this one. All right. Selecting this allows us to take these points and move them. So I can take this point if I'm not happy with the placement, and I can move it anywhere I want, such as right there. Perfect. Now, when I select on a point, you'll notice that I have some options down here along the bottom. This will allow us to shape how this line passes through this point here. Now, by default, these lines pass through this point as a sharp corner. So this line starts off here and then quickly makes a sharp corner. And that is this option here by default, just change to a corner. But if I select this middle option here, it smooths out that corner. So you have something that looks like this. And you can see how this line now passes through that point. It's a smooth curve. Now you'll also notice that we have these orange markers here. You can click and grab and drag on these because you can move this around. And what this essentially does, it allows you to influence how this line passes through this point here. And if I take those markers and I stretch them out, it impacts a larger portion of that line and influences how it passes through that point. If we select this point here, this final option here is the same idea, but what it does is it breaks the handles. And if I select it, you're going to notice that I can now move these handles independently of each other and basically have a greater degree of control in how the line moves towards and then away from this point. Actually, that is pretty darn close to the shape that I would like. Now, let's go up here to the corners because I'm going to show you what we're doing up here. Now you're going to notice that this shape extends outside of this object, which means then when I apply this shape, soon to be a cutout, this cutout will not be removing this edge here. And that's okay because we created this edge back when we first created that red object, and I would like to keep that curved edge. So I'm going to ensure that my cutout does not remove this curved edge here. Now the other thing I want to fix up is this point right here because you're going to end up with this corner there, which I don't want. I want to smooth this out. So let's select it and let's go with this kind of curve here. We're going to smooth this out. And I'm going to take this with the broken handles and just play around with the shape there like this. This is the shape that I would like. And let's just do one more edit there. I would like to take this point and actually move it down. Like that. That is pretty close to the shape of the vase that we had originally. So this is what I love about Sketch. Once you've thrown down the points, you certainly can edit them, move them around, add more points, and then as you start to form those lines and shape how they move through those points, you have some options here in terms of how those lines will behave as they curve around your plotted points. All right, I think we're happy with this. It's again, just half of my overall shape, but we're gonna click now, Finish Sketch. All right, now at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this and we're going to create the other half of this shape to complete our soon-to-be cutout. So we'll take it, press Ctrl D or duplicate. Now, when this happens, it's going to look like nothing has changed. But in fact, if you take this and I click on it and I drag it out, you can see how I have now a duplicate there. Let's undo this. But while it is selected, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to mirror it or flip it by using the mirror tool or pressing M. And I'm going to flip it along the X-axis. There it is there. Now, I want to move this so that it is pressed right up against this inside surface of my original shape. And one way to do that is to use the Workplane tool. I'm going to select the Workplane tool, and then I'm going to place it on this inside surface here of my original shape. What this now does is that it establishes this temporary workplane here that you can see here in yellow. It's very similar to the workplane that we started off with at the start of our project. But this becomes an important frame of reference because we can then use the drop tool. The drop tool allows us to take an object and drop it onto the workplane. By default, it would drop it to the workplane that we see down here, but because we've established this new workplane using the Workplane tool, any object that I select, such as the duplicated object, if I press D or use the Drop to Workplane tool, it will then take that object and drop it onto this workplane, which we had pressed up right up against the middle surface of our original object. I now know that these two objects are pressed up perfectly against each other. All right, let's get out of this Workplane tool. I'm going to select it again and just press anywhere outside of that workplane. There you go. The last part is for me to select both objects. So let's select our first one here on the right, press and hold Shift as I select the object on the left, and we're going to use the Group tool or Control G. That should be my final shape right there. Now that we like this shape, we're going to create our cutout. So we need to turn this into a hole. And because we've set this up properly in our sketch, we know that this hole is centered perfectly to our red solid behind it. Now to complete the cutout, we need to actually create the body of our cutout. And we're going to drag out another cube like this. And this is how I often do it. I just try to match it up to the thickness of my sketch here. So this thickness of the sketch by default is 1 centimeter. So I'm going to make this thickness 1 centimeter as well. And what I want to make sure of is I want to make sure that these two objects, the hole as well as my soon-to-be body of my cutout, are aligned perfectly side by side to each other. So I'm going to select both and then click the alignment tool or L. And I'm going to select the hole because it's perfectly set right now. I don't want it to move. So I'm going to select it and then I'm going to align the red cube to that hole. And I just did it there, so it's lined up perfectly. So it's side by side. Let's click out of this. Next, I'm going to resize this red cube by finding the black grab point along the side that allows me to stretch it across the x-axis. Then to resize it on the z-axis, we'll grab that white grab point towards the top of our object and move it up. Now, obviously it's not centered, and I want to make sure that the body of this cutout extends past the body of my soon-to-be vase. And I'm going to have to center it again. So I'm going to select the hole as well as this body of my cutout, and I'm going to use the alignment tool again, or L, and I'm just going to center it along the x-axis, but I don't want the hole to move, so I'm going to make sure I select the hole and then align the body of my cutout to the hole there. Let's click outside of this. All right. Finally, we're going to select the body of my cutout as well as the hole, and we're going to group them, or Control G, like that. So this is the cutout, but the final piece to this is we need to make this a hole, like that. After this, we can just simply take this and drag it across our red object there. And I'm going to use the black grab point there because it's going to allow us to resize this just along the one axis, just like that. Now, if I take it and I group it, or Control G, this is our final object. Now, it looks awkward because you can see here from the front, it doesn't look too bad, but obviously from the side, it still has a ways to go. But this is the beautiful thing with using cutouts. I can apply the cutout in many different directions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another copy of that cutout we've just made. I'm going to double click on this to temporarily ungroup my object here. And I'm going to select this cutout that we've just made, and I'm going to copy it, Control C, and then I'm going to exit out of this temporary grouped object by clicking outside. There you go. And I'm going to paste my cutout. So let's do Control V. And what we're going to do now is we're going to rotate this so that the cutout is going to be applied from the side. So I'm going to take this directional arrow here. Let me just recenter this so we can see it a little bit better. Take this directional arrow here, and I'm just going to rotate it by staying inside this circle here, and by clicking and dragging it, it will snap every 22.5 degrees. So I'm going to move it so that it is 90 degrees. Let's click outside of that to get us out. And now it's just a matter of us aligning this hole and centering it to our soon-to-be vase here. So I'm going to select both, click on the alignment tool, or L. I'm going to select our vase to keep it in place, and I'm going to then center it along the y-axis now, and the x-axis. Let's recenter that again. And the x-axis, like that. And we're going to select both and group them again, or Control G. That is our final vase shape right there. And if you'll notice that we've got those beautiful curved edges there along the top, and we have those curved edges down along the bottom as well. There it is. That is the vase shape. Now, we still have yet to create the hole in our vase, and that's coming up next. Obviously, this is a solid object, and we need to make this into more like a container, like a cup. And if you saw an earlier video that I made about making vases, we would make a copy of this, resize it, and turn it into a cutout that we would then group with this original object here. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's copy and paste. And let's just move this off to the side here so we can take a good look at it. So we're going to turn this into a hole and size it down and hopefully leave enough thickness there for our walls when we merge these two or group these two objects together. So if we look at the dimensions of our original object, this has a dimension of 120 centimeters by 120 centimeters. So we are going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to actually enter in these values separately. Let's make this 110 millimeters or 11 centimeters. Same thing on this side. Let's click on this and make it 110 millimeters. Perfect. Now we do have to make sure we have a bottom to this. If I simply turn this into a hole and then merge it with our original object, this hole is also going to be all the way down at the bottom. So we don't want that. We're going to, let's make this solid again. And we are going to need to take away from the bottom of this, I don't know, 5 millimeters. So let's take out this and let's make this a height of 5 for 5 millimeters. And we're just going to drag it across the bottom of our soon-to-be hole here. Now we're going to group both of them and Control G. There it is there. Now let's turn this into a hole. And next, finally, we're going to take both of these, select them both, and we are going to align them, or L. And we're going to select the vase here so that the hole will then move to the vase. And we're just going to center it along the X and along the Y axis. Let's recenter it. And finally, let's just group this. Let's see what we've got here. Control G. Wait for it. There it is. Now, if we want to just do a quick double check to see how the thickness of our walls turned out, let's select it and let's turn this into a hole. Ooh. Interesting. So that thickness is actually pretty good at the top, but it starts to get really thin down along the bottom. Now, this is just a model. I'm not intending on 3D printing this, but if I were, I might want to make the thickness of the walls a little bit thicker. And if I wanted to do that, I would just essentially take our hole here and resize it so that it's slightly smaller and allowing for more of that wall to be left in place when we remerge or regroup these two objects together. But that is essentially our vase. And we use Sketch to create cutouts that allowed us to apply it from the front as well as from the side. And when we did that, we could create a very unique shape. In this case, our vase. Similarly, we also had to create another cutout by taking this same shape of the vase, resizing it, and then grouping it with our original object to create a hole that is perfectly shaped to our vase. So that's it. A little bit about cutouts and Sketch. You can create some unique shapes, some great designs here, and this is a very simple application of it. It starts to stack, and you can start to get more and more complex as you get deeper with Sketch. I'm hoping that gave you some ideas here, and we will see you on the next video.